Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 12-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. Before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players that cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And if you want to follow me over on Twitter, I'm at ChrisPennell16, CPen16 over on IG. And if you miss more of my content over on Patreon, it's always much appreciated. We got around 300 people. You can hop into the Discord chat, or you can just get access to all the extra content that I put out each and every single day, or each and every single week, depending on the sport. So, like I said, if you're interested, links in the description below. If not, hey, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So the pitching on this slate is pretty loaded. There's a ton of good options, and I could have listed more guys, but I didn't want to just list every single pitcher. But like Giolito, Garrett Cole, Kenta Maeda, Max Fried, Aaron Savali, even Brandon Woodruff, these guys are all viable. But the two guys I liked up top the most were Lucas Giolito and Garrett Cole. I'm viewing them as our aces of the slate. We'll start up top with Lucas Giolito. He comes in at 10,500, and he's having a phenomenal season so far. If we're looking at his season statistics, a 3.02 xFIP, a 34% K rate. He had a complete game shutout with a no-hitter earlier this season versus the Pirates, only allowing 39% hard contact rate and .74 home runs per 9 innings. And he draws a pretty soft matchup here versus the Kansas City Royals, which, look, they're not like the worst team in the world, but they're pretty low in the totem pole when it comes to right-handed pitching. They have a 24% K rate, 8% walk rate, 174 team ISO, and just pretty low numbers overall. So I think Lucas Giolito is in a fine spot here, and he's had some pretty good games so far this season. Could definitely match Garrett Cole's upside, and to be honest, Garrett Cole's not really flashed his upside that he had last season, so I wouldn't hate for 200 more bucks just to get Lucas Giolito. If you're looking at his numbers this year, he scored 20, 59, 43, then 7, but then 24, 27, 21. So he's having a really good season. He's got ace-level stuff. Obviously, he's got ace-level stuff. He is an ace, but he's got tremendous stuff. One of the best pitchers in the league. So definitely like Lucas Giolito at SP1 today. I also don't mind Garrett Cole at SP1 at 10,300. I think he's going to end up being higher owned than Lucas Giolito, and that might just be off a name value alone, but I still like the spot here versus Baltimore. But I got to be honest, pitching in Camden Yards, I am a little bit concerned of maybe a couple of home runs being given up by Garrett Cole, but I'm kind of hoping those are just solo shots for the most part, because if you're looking at his numbers this year, he's given up some power. Like, he's still got good numbers with a 3.69 xFIP, a 32% K rate, and only a 6% walk rate. But the real concern here is the 46.9% fly ball rate with the 2.35 home runs per 9 innings giving up. Like, he has given up quite a bit of power here. But I like the strikeout upside. Baltimore does not really pose much of a threat offensively. Yes, they do have some decent offensive pieces, and they have been hitting decently well so far this year. But I'm going to side with the talent of Garrett Cole over the Baltimore Orioles lineup. And Vegas will as well. They only have 3.49 implied team total. Cole's got a 70% chance for the win and 8 strikeouts over in Vegas. So definitely Garrett Cole at SP1 today. I think you're really splitting hairs between Cole and Giolito. I think Cole will end up being higher owned in cash games today, so maybe you want to side with him, but both are fine options. Now looking at SP2s, we have Justice Sheffield here at 7,600, and he gets that wonderful matchup versus the Texas Rangers, which I'll use pretty much any pitcher there is versus the Rangers, because offensively this season they have just been awful. We just saw Kikuchi score nearly 30 DraftKings points versus them last night as a lefty, and we're getting the lefty on the mound here, and they've been super bad versus lefties this year. If you're looking at their splits overall, 2 left-handed pitching, only have 5% walk rate, and your 25% K rate, a 71 WRC plus, and very just low numbers overall. Sheffield has flashed some upside so far this season. He's got an ERA around 5, but a 4.25 xFIP is not awful. 22% K rate, 9% walk rate's a little bit up there, but not really giving up much power. Only 0.3 home runs per 9 innings. And the last time he did face the Rangers, he did score 20 fantasy points, striking out 5 over 6 innings. So I think Sheffield is going to be a fine option here. He's just pretty cheap, and he slides in nicely at SP2. And there's plenty of value on this slate to be able to fit him in anyway. And then if you want a cheap option, we have Kyle Gibson at 6,200, who just seems a bit too cheap. Now, do I think Kyle Gibson's a very good pitcher? I do not, but I don't think he's a 6,200 pitcher. If you're looking at his prices this season, it's been around 8,000 to around 7,000. His last start, it was 6,100 versus the Dodgers, and he did score 11 points and strike out 8 versus the Dodgers, and the Mariners are a much softer match than the Dodgers are. So at 6,200, I think he's a pretty fine pump play at SP2 today. If you don't want to spend $1,400 more for Sheffield, Going down to Gibson at 6,200 versus the Mariners, I think is fine if you're looking at their splits versus righties this season. I preferred lefties versus them. They've actually been hitting righties somewhat well, but 23% K rate, 247 batting average, 100 WRC plus. It's not like a great matchup for Gibson, but overall the Mariners team doesn't scare me too much, and I just think he's a little bit underpriced, to be honest. On the season, he's got a 4.26 xFIP, 20% K rate, high ground ball rate, is giving up over 2 home runs per 9 innings and a near 50% hard contact rate, but we're not needing much at 6,200. We kind of just need around 10 points, which I think Gibson is certainly able to do so. So that's pretty much it at pitching. There's a couple of other good options that you can put on, you can play on this slate, but these are the kind of the guys that stood out to me the most. And we'll move on to the bats now at this point. And we'll start up top with Travis d'Arnaud going up against Eric Fedde, and the Braves are going to be one of the best stacks in the entire slate. I actually think they have the highest team total as well, but Eric Fedde is just not a very good pitcher in the slightest. He's a very low strikeout pitcher so far this season, a 7% K rate to lefties and an 8% K rate to righties, and not very good versus either side of the plate. So I think you can feel free to load up on all these Braves bats for the most part. d'Arnaud is pretty expensive, but looking at his numbers versus righties this season, yeah, 355 batting average, a 275 ISO, and over a 400 WOBA, so I think d'Arnaud is fine in Brave stacks or just in general. James McCann, 4,700. Love all the White Sox today. I believe they have the second highest team total. They're going up against Chris Bubic, the lefty, and he's not been like a complete trash can, but he hasn't been great this year. To lefties, he's really struggled with a 17% walk rate and a 437 WOBA. I still got to get his ISO, given up some of these new guys that don't have their ISOs and fly ball rates and ground ball rates up yet. But overall, I think we can just use the Chicago White Sox offense because they've been amazing versus lefties this season. I believe they have over a 300 team ISO to left-handed pitching, so they're all going to profile out pretty well here, and McCann's always been pretty good versus left-handed pitching. So far this season, he's been 450 batting average, a 560 on base percentage, a 233 WRC plus, over a 200 ISO. So yeah, McCann's, if you got the money for him, I think he's an excellent play. Then just two cheap options here in Jose Trevino, 2,900. He's been hitting the ball pretty well. He's been hitting lefties really well this season with a near 400 batting average, over a 400 WOBA and a 171 WRC plus, and over a 200 ISO. Now, I like Sheffield at SP2 today, but it's not you can't just completely disregard Trevino here just because catcher's the position I typically like to go down on. And look, he should be hitting near the middle of the order, and he's been pretty good versus lefties. So even if you are using Sheffield, I wouldn't just hate throwing on Trevino as a cheap catcher option. Like, I think last night Trevino was around 30% owned, and Kikuchi was like one of the chalk pitchers, and it still ended up working out. And then Tucker Barnhart, 2,400, just a cheap lefty here versus Trevor Williams. Trevor Williams is a guy that's always struggled versus lefties, a very low K rate. And he's actually struggled versus lefties and righties so far this season, but I've always preferred lefties versus him. And if you're looking at Barnhart's splits versus righties this year, it's not impressive in the slightest, but he'll be in the lineup with the righty Trevor Williams in the mound, and I think he's a decent option here. Then dropping down to some more fun positions in first base, we have Jose Abreu, 5,400. He's been smashing lefties all season, and I don't see why that would change today. And I like all the White Sox here for the most part, a team total of near 6, and I think you can feel free to load up on these guys. The problem is a lot of the White Sox are expensive, so it's not an easy stack to stack. That's why I typically leave off the White Sox in a lot of my videos, because they're super expensive for the most part. There's a couple of guys that are cheap, but they're just really pricey, but I do like them on this slate. I mean, over a 250 ISO to lefties this year and just elite numbers overall, so don't mind Jose Abreu. Freddie Freeman, if I had to pick between the two, I'd probably go with Freeman just because I like the Braves a little bit more in this slate. And Eric Fedde's just not a very good pitcher, very low strikeout rate, and Freeman crushes right-handed pitching, over a 300 batting average versus them this season, a 416 on base percentage, near 300 ISO, so yes, I like Freddie Freeman in all formats. Then Luke Voit, 4,500, definitely like the Yankees here, and they're also pretty cheap as well, so it's not hard to stack them up. They're going to be going up against Keegan Aiken here for the Baltimore Orioles, and I pretty much like all the Yankees here in Camden Yards. It's a great hitter's park, and you get the guaranteed ninth inning at bats, and they should be able to tee off for the most part. And Luke Voit, only 4,500. He's been crushing lefties this season. Only a 26% ground ball rate to them and a 522 ISO to lefties this year. He's been absolutely annihilating them, so I definitely like Luke Voit here in cash games or in GPP stacks for the Yankees. And if you're looking at Aiken splits this year versus righties, again, I don't have some of the power numbers and the ground ball rates for some of these newer pitchers or the guys that didn't pitch last season. But for righties, for Aiken, 420 WOBA, giving up 15% K rate and a 15% walk rate. So definitely like the righties here on the Yankees. Then we'll drop down to second base, and we have Kevon Biggio here at 4,900, like all the Blue Jays on this slate. They have one of the higher team totals going up against Ryan Weber in Boston. I also saw another, was it Marcus Walden? I forget where it was, but I think it's Ryan Weber for the most part. But anyway, whoever Boston tends to throw out there usually gets shelved for the most part, so I think you can stack all the Blue Jays. I think he's the only one I have listed here out of or him and Jonathan Villar. But I think you can still full stack the lineup. But just individually, I like Biggio the most. 4,900, he's very good versus right-handed pitching. And Boston just sucks in all aspects on whoever they throw out on the mound. So it doesn't really matter who's on the mound. But Ryan Weber's supposed to be starting, and he's not great versus lefties or versus righties. But versus lefties, on your 300 ISO, only a 10% K rate. And Biggio, some pretty good splits versus right-handed pitching. So definitely like Biggio today. Robinson Cano at 4,500. I like all the Mets lefties here versus Spencer Howard. He's been a little tougher on the righties, but lefties he has given up quite a bit. Looking at his splits this season, and you're 500 over to left-handed hitters this year, and Robinson Cano, he's been smashing righties this season, over a 200 WRC plus, a 470 WOBA, and a 421 batting average, and near 700 slugging. So yeah, definitely like Robinson Cano and all of the Mets lefties. Speaking of Mets lefties, we have Jeff McNeil here at 3,700. He'll probably be more popular in Cano just because he's nearly $1,000 cheaper, but both are fine options here. He hasn't been as good versus righties, but still decent splits overall, and I like all the lefties here versus Spencer Howard. And I think the Mets are one of the better stacks on the entire slate. Team total of above 5.6 currently, and they're also not that expensive either. And then dropping down to third base, he's also eligible at second base as well. But DJ LeMahieu, 5,200, super expensive, but always like him versus lefties or versus righties. I think the entire Yankees lineup is in play here. And he's actually got a 0% K rate to lefties this season so far, which is unbelievable. I had to double check if that's right, but we know he's an elite contact hitter, and look, good numbers here versus lefties. I believe a 333 batting average and a 412 on base percentage and 142 WRC plus. So definitely have some interest in LeMahieu when it comes to Yankee stacks, or just if you want to one-off a Yankees player. I think DJ is probably one of the better options. Then Max Muncy, 5,100. He went deep last night, and I don't really love using guys versus Marquez. I don't have a lot of Dodgers listed here for the most part. But if you're going to use anybody versus him, you want the lefties, and Max Muncy's got power versus lefties and versus righties. And if you're looking at Marquez's splits, he's always given up a little bit more power and a lower strikeout rate when it comes to left-handed bats. So Max Muncy, totally fine here in Dodger stacks, or if you're just using it as a one-off, that's fine too. But again, not like fully looking to attack Dodgers today. They do have a team total below 5, which, given their price tags, is not going to scream great value for them today. And then we have Rafael Devers here at 5,000 going against Chase Anderson. I like Devers anytime he's facing a right-handed pitcher just because he tends to crush right-handed pitching. If you're looking at his splits this season versus righties, on your 300 ISO and your 400 on base percentage, of 571 slugging, and just good numbers all around. And the Red Sox do have a team total of near 5 today. I don't really love the Red Sox, but I wouldn't completely shy away from them. And Devers would be my favorite option, but I just really can't see myself playing too much Boston today. But Josh Donaldson, 3,700. I assume he's going to be one of the more popular plays on the entire slate because he's super cheap and he is facing a lefty. And I still need to update some of his numbers because he has barely played this season, so we're not going to have really any splits for him. And if you're looking at the stat sheet, you're probably thinking Donaldson's an awful play. But he's always been good versus lefties in his career, so willing to give Donaldson a shot here. And Skubal, he's actually not been terrible versus lefties, but when it comes to the righties, 500 WOBA so far this season. It's a very small sample size, but still 500 WOBA to righties and a less than 20% K rate. So definitely don't mind Josh Donaldson here and Nelson Cruz, which I will talk about in a little bit. Dropping down a shortstop, we have Tim Anderson, 5,600. He has some of the best numbers versus left-handed pitching so far this season out of anybody. It's a smaller sample size, but he's been crushing. A 710 ISO, a 710 WOBA, 559 on base percentage, 367 WRC plus, a 1,200 slugging, and a 516 batting average. Again, he doesn't have as big a sample size as some of the other guys because he has missed some games, but he's been crushing lefties when given the opportunity. So I don't mind Tim Anderson in White Sox stacks, but it's going to be hard to fit him in as a one-off. But Corey Seager, 4,900, I could see him being another strong cash game play. Even though I don't love using guys versus Marquez, Seager's been great versus righties this season, and he's below 5K, so I like the price we're getting. But 200 WRC plus to righties, 731 slugging, a 360 batting average, only a 12% K rate, and a near 400 ISO. And like I said, Marquez has always been a little bit worse versus lefties, so definitely Corey Seager. He's been a guy I like playing a lot this season. Then Jonathan Villar, he's just a cheap part of Toronto if you want to just throw on a stack, or if you're using a cheaper option at second base or shortstop. But the numbers aren't going to wow you, but he's fine. Then dropping down to the outfield, we have Nelson Cruz, 5,800, super expensive, but like the righties here versus Skubal, and Nelson Cruz is one of the best bats in the league versus left-handed pitching, always has been. But if you're looking at his numbers, they're just a little silly. A 438 batting average, a 594 ISO, 611 WOBA, near 300 WRC plus, and over 1,000 slugging. So yeah, Nelson Cruz, if you get the money for him, one of the top home run threats on the entire slate. Cody Bellinger, 5,500. Again, don't really love using all these Dodgers bats, but if you're going to use anybody versus German Marquez, you're going to use the lefties, and Cody Bellinger has elite numbers versus right-handed pitching, so he's a fine option. Ronald Acuna, 4,800, pretty cheap here, below 5K, and I think he went double dong yesterday, if I remember correctly. But he's going to be leading off here versus Fetty, and I love the Braves, and I think he can use the entire offense here, so Acuna below 5K leading off. Obviously going to grade out as a pretty elite play. He's been crushing right-handed pitching this season with over a 300 batting average, over a 300 ISO, and just great numbers all around. So definitely like Acuna at only 4,800. Michael Conforto, I love playing Michael Conforto, and I like the lefties here versus Spencer Howard. He went deep last night. I love all the Mets lefties here for the most part, and Conforto's always had some good splits versus righties. So far this season, the ISO has been down versus righties, but overall in his career and last season, he's been amazing versus right-handed pitching. So certainly viable here. A 342 batting average, 161 WRC plus, and elite numbers all around. So definitely like Conforto. Also like Marcell Ozuna, 4,500. He's been hot so far this season. He had a triple dong night, then he followed it up with another homer night. And I don't know what he did last night. I forget. But I still like Ozuna here. He's been good versus lefties and versus righties. Specifically, very, very good versus lefties, but still got good power versus righties. And Eric Fetty is not a pitcher that we should be concerned about. Then we have two Mets bats here, and Brandon Nimmo and Dominic Smith. Pretty similar plays here. They're the same exact price, and if you're stacking up the Mets, feel free to play both. Dominic Smith's also eligible at first base as well, but both have had fine splits versus righties so far this season. Nimmo's got a 21% walk rate, 187 WRC plus, 300 batting average, and Dominic Smith's had a bit more power with over a 400 ISO, a near 200 WRC plus, and a 746 slugging. So both are elite options here in my opinion. Then we have two Yankees bats, and Aaron Hicks and Clint Frazier, both going up against the lefty in Keegan Aiken here, which he's a guy that doesn't really scare me too much, and the Yankees have a team total of over 5.5, and they should be able to do well here. If you're looking at both their splits versus lefties this season, not that impressive, but I don't think Aiken's a very impressive pitcher, and the Yankees should be able to have a pretty good day. So I think Hicks and Clint Frazier are both fine options here. Then if you need a value option, we have Gregory Polanco at 2,900 versus Anthony DeSclafani. DeSclafani, he's had a horrible start versus Pittsburgh earlier in the year. I think it was about a month ago, but he gave up 9 runs and I believe 2 innings. So absolutely smashed. I don't expect that to happen again for him, although I believe he just gave up 7 runs I think last game. But Gregory Polanco, he's always had some decent splits versus right-handed pitching so far this season, over a 280 ISO, only a 140 batting average and a 40% K rate, but I think he's okay below 3K. And DeSclafani's always been someone we can use lefties against so far this season, over a 400 WOBA, 31% fly ball rate, and over a 200 ISO given up. So don't mind Polanco there for value, but that's going to be pretty much it. There's a couple of guys I probably left off. Like, I think you can use guys like Randall Grichuk, Teoscar Hernandez if you're stacking the Blue Jays, but individually I didn't like them as much as some of the other guys. So that's going to be it. I hope this video was helpful, though. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, it's pretty much going to be it. If you want to see some of my NASCAR content, I love NASCAR DFS. I posted a video on Thursday, so you can check that out. And I'll also be going live tomorrow around 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, discussing the upcoming NASCAR DFS slate and just hanging out with you guys. So yeah, it's pretty much going to be it. Follow me on social media if you want. Support me on Patreon. But yeah, I'm going to get out of here, and I hope you guys enjoy your weekend.